Data types are one of the big additions to the XSD language, or one of the big advantages over the old DTD world. Now, what's going to happen with the data types in XSD is we can now, when we validate a document, determine what particular type of data that can be used in a particular markup tag. So now we're really creating our own markup language in a big way, because I can put a tag out there that says cost, C-O-S-T, so it's the cost of an item. But I can limit the type of data you put in there. It has to be numeric. It has to be decimal. I can put an upper limit on it. I can put a range in there that it has to be. All kind of things can happen with these data types. Now, if you've used data types in other programming languages, VB, Java, so forth, then you know about these. You'll feel a lot more comfortable with these than what you did with some of the other things in DTDs, because we're simply going to choose a particular data type and use it in the document. Now, the XSD language separates data types into two general categories, and you need to be aware of these. First is called simple data, and this is what you normally think of as a data type: numbers, strings, dates, times, those sorts of things, just like we've always seen. And of course, numbers is broken down further, integers and so forth. We'll talk about that later. Complex data is like mixed elements, sequences, elements that have to be in a particular sequence with a particular number of things happening and so forth, those kinds of things. So when we're talking about what kind of data can go somewhere, generally we're talking about simple data. When we're talking about relationships of that data amongst each other, certain more definitive finite control of that data, we're getting into complex data, and you'll see that a little later in some examples. Now, the complex data, though, is built upon the simple data types. We're going to have, strings in a certain order, dates in a certain order, and so forth. Now, let's take a look at the data types individually and just kind of introduce you to them. First of all, the string data type obviously is text data. No big deal there. You have the Boolean data types. This is where we can store true, false values. This can also be represented as 1 or 0. 1 is true, 0 is false. Next up are the number data types. Now, you have integer, which is obviously whole numbers. Decimal, which is fractional numbers with a decimal point. The float, which lets you handle larger numbers because it has the 32-bit storage area. Then double, which utilizes 64 bits of memory. So really large numbers can be managed there. Also, an integer up here, you can determine whether it's a positive or negative number and so forth. So those are pretty straightforward. Date and time, there's some real interesting things here in date and time, and it's kind of small because I wanted to get them all on the screen so you could see them all together. First of all, there's a data type called time that is simply the time of day. And this is like when you call the getNow or getDate function in various languages, Transact SQL or VB or whatever. Time instant is a data type, and this is a particular instant in time, August 4th, 2005, so forth. Time duration, this is a length of time. 3 hours, 45 minutes, 13 seconds, and so forth. That's time duration data type. Date is a day in time, what we normally think about as a day in time. Month, no questions there. Year, notice we can keep up with century. We can also do, this one's real interesting, a recurring date. This is a date, say August 23rd, without a year attached, without regard for a year. So this can be a recurring date from year to year. And then recurring day, the same thing at the day level. It is day information without a regard for a month or a year. So you can have, every Tuesday something happens and so forth, or only Tuesdays can be in here. So there's a lot of information that you can deal with these data types with. And there's just a lot more abilities now to really fine-tune these documents and make sure you're getting the right kind of data where you want it. Now, probably the coolest thing about this with XSD data types is custom data types. You can create your own data type. Let's say that you've got an integer, you want to use an integer, but you want it to be in a certain range. You can create your own data type that restricts that. And these are always built off the simple data types. So XSD data types gives you a whole lot more flexibility and a whole lot more control over your validation.